Welcome to the Dopkins & Company CMMC Frequently Asked Questions. I'm Patrick Ross. I'm here with Bill Crone, and we're hoping to address all of the questions that our clients and prospective clients have asked us regarding CMMC. So with that, we'll lead off with Bill. What is CMMC?
So CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It is a program that was created by the Department of Defense to ensure that organizations in the defense supply chain have cybersecurity in place, because the DoD thinks that, and rightly so, that our national security is at stake if certain aspects of the defense industry are compromised.
Okay, so what does cybersecurity maturity mean?
So cybersecurity maturity, there's two words there. Each one of those words has a meaning. So the cybersecurity part is related to the internet, right? So the definition of cybersecurity is information security in an environment where you're connected to this global internet thing where people can hack in or emails can be compromised, etc. So cybersecurity is specifically internet related. The security part of that has three aspects that not everybody really probably understands. The first and the most common would be confidentiality. So are your systems and your data, your information, protected from people who shouldn't be able to see that information? That's confidentiality. Second aspect of security is integrity. Are your systems and your data accurate, correct, not subject to alteration when they shouldn't be subject to alteration? And the third is availability. Can you get to your systems and your data when and where you need to get there? So anything that is internet or online technology related that might compromise your confidentiality, integrity, or availability is cybersecurity. Maturity is just what you'd think it would be, is how much experience and practice do you have in doing whatever this thing is, in this case, cybersecurity. So an organization that has had strong passwords in place for 10 years is more mature than one that just started doing it last week. So the reason it's important is that the CMMC program is a certification. So the Department of Defense wants to come out and audit and certify you in advance before they give you confidential information, rather than wait, give you the information, hope you protect it, and if you don't, come out and figure out why. So if they're gonna rely on your maturity to say, okay, we've been doing this, we know how to do it, we're doing it consistently. So that's the maturity part. So that's unique, I think, in probably amongst most, if not all, of the cybersecurity programs that exist out there today. There's not a whole lot of them that try to determine in advance, are you secure? And if so, we'll give you the good housekeeping seal of approval, that certification.
Okay, so where did these requirements come from?
So the federal government has had, for some amount of time, a set of requirements that you've got to follow if you want to be a vendor to the government, a supplier. So FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, are the federal laws that determine what you need to do if you're a government provider of some sort. Under FAR, each department in the government can make their own modifications and customizations to that federal acquisition requirement. So the Defense Department came up with their own detailed specific rules called DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. So they've said, here's FAR, we're going to add and modify it in this way. So again, it was focused on DoD trying to protect national security with their data. So DFARS has for several years now required that a supplier to the Department of Defense comply with NIST 800-171. So what is NIST 800-171? It's a document this thick, printed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which lists over 100 things that you should be doing to be cyber secure. So Department of Defense came out with DFARS and NIST 800-171 saying, here's all the steps you got to do. So those rules aren't new. They've been around for a few years. What CMMC does adds a little bit to those rules, but on top of are you following the rules is how mature, again, the word maturity, how mature are you in doing that? What processes do you have in place to ensure that you're consistently applying those rules?
Okay, so what topics does CMMC cover?
So cybersecurity is like medicine, right? It's a pretty broad topic. So there's a lot of things related to cybersecurity, and there's a lot of ways that an organization can protect itself. CMMC has what it calls domains, and it has 17 domains. A domain is basically a category of security rules and processes that you might have in place. So there's 17 different domains. Couple of examples. One domain would be awareness and training. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory. What things do you do in your organization to make sure that your employees and your vendors and your stakeholders are aware of the risks and are trained in how to protect themselves and your organization from those risks? So that's one domain. Another domain would be physical protections, right? So locks on the doors, cameras, things like that in an organization to prevent someone from getting physically to the server or the data files or things like that. So there's a lot of different areas in CMMC, they've defined 17.
Okay, so who does CMMC apply to?
So it's supposed to apply to anybody, any organization who is a supplier anywhere in the Department of Defense supply chain. So it could be a direct prime contractor of the DoD, like say a Boeing, or it could be a relatively small subcontractor, right? Somebody who makes a part for a product and sells it to Boeing. So anywhere down the supply chain. According to the DoD, there are 400,000 organizations in the US that are somewhere in the Department of Defense supply chain. So, so that's what it applies to, and specifically to any organization that holds FCI or CUI.
Okay, and what is FCI and CUI?
So FCI stands for Federal Contract Information. So what is that? Basically names and addresses. So imagine there's a guy in the Pentagon, a buyer, who orders your product from you. You're going to have his name, his address, his rank, his email address, his phone number, those sorts of contact information. And so FCI is that information. It's pretty common type information, but the Department of Defense is trying to protect that information because it can be used to exploit access to that guy, right? They could send him phishing emails or whatever it is. And so as benign as it might seem, it is a risk for that information. So FCI is the federal contract information is the lesser of the two. The greater of the two is CUI, controlled unclassified information. So this talks about things that would be more sensitive in the process, like blueprints of what you're making, or specifications, what goes into it, what its vulnerabilities might be, or anything like that that is obviously more sensitive, related to a specific product or service or supplier that's involved. So if you're holding FCI, you have to protect it. If you're holding CUI, you have to protect it even more because it's more important data.
Okay. So when you talk about protecting data, what's required from the contractors that are bound by CMMC?
So there's, as I said, these two levels, FCI and CUI. There are 5 levels of what you need to do to be certified in CMMC. Level 1 is the lowest, level 5 is the highest. And the more sensitive the data you have, the more controls you're supposed to follow, which I think makes some sense. So if you're an organization that just has FCI, you're required to conform to level 1 of CMMC. If you have CUI, you're required to conform to level 3 of CMMC. And if you have more sensitive information, although that's not really defined yet by DoD, more sensitive information would require you to have even more higher levels, level 4 or 5.
Okay, so what do each of these levels represent?
Okay, so in level 1, you have to do 17 practices. These are kinds of things that you would probably be able to guess that you'd have to do. You should have strong passwords. You should have a backup. You should not publicly post data that's sensitive. I mean, they're kind of almost common sense in this day and age security practices that you would expect to have. So it's not, frankly, a really heavy lift for an organization to be level 1 because there's only 17 things, and chances are you're doing at least some of them. Level 2 adds 55 more practices and requires you to document all the things you're doing. Level 3 adds another 58 practices on top of that. So now you're up to 130 some odd practices. So as you go through, the list of requirements grows.
Okay, so what are some examples of practices?
Okay, a practice is like a thou shalt or thou shalt not kind of list. So a practice might be you are required, you have strong passwords defined as 10 characters or more, upper and lower case, special characters, etc. So that could be a practice. Another practice would be you require your employees to change the password every 45 days. Okay. Another practice might be you can't reuse passwords in that you've used before. So those are, basically a fairly prescriptive list. This is what you must do. This is what you cannot do. As I said, the list of what's on that list grows the higher up the levels you go.
Okay. So the other side of that is the maturity of processes. What exactly is a process?
So a process is a way that you implement the practice. Okay. So if, let's say, the practice is you have to have a strong password, right? 10 characters, upper, lowercase, blah, blah, blah. That's the practice. How do you accomplish that? Do you just tell your employees when you hire them, oh, by the way, you got to have a strong password? And that's it. Okay, the process isn't very good, right? Because you're not guaranteeing they're going to follow that. There's no rules to ensure it. If you say the way I do it is I have my network set up that when they enter a password, if they don't fulfill those requirements, it says, your password is not strong enough. That's a better process because it ensures that they're doing what the practice says, right? So a process is how do you make the practice happen? So a better process is one that guarantees you'll do it. A better process is one that you've done for many months or years consistently over and over again, so I know it's not a fluke. A better process is one that's documented so that if I have turnover in my people, the process continues to go along the same way it should have always been because the new person gets out the documentation and follows it. So those are all ways that you improve the process, which basically is a stronger guarantee that these practices you put in place are actually being followed and are effective.
Okay. So with all the practices and processes in mind, what are the steps to get certified?
So every organization in that supply chain, all 400,000, are supposed to get certified. So how do you do that? Well, the end game is you get audited. You get a certifier sent, you hire somebody to come out and physically do an audit that checks against all the practices and processes that are required in your level and says, okay, you're doing it or you're not. To get certified, you have to pass 100%. If there's 130 requirements and you do 129, you fail. You have to do all of them. So how do you get there? Well, it depends on where you are and what level you're at. So if you're a level 1, it's going to be a lot easier to get there than if you're a level 3 because there's a lot fewer things to do. So the first step would be to do a gap analysis, to literally get the list and go down item by item. Am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Am I blah, 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 blah. So if you're subject to level 3, which is 130 things, and you got 50 of them done, that means you got 80 things to create, okay? How long is it gonna take you to create these 80 things? Well, again, it depends on what they are. If it's a process for changing passwords, you might be able to do it overnight. Some things that might take you weeks or months to implement, and you got 80 of them to do. So step 1 is you do a gap analysis, compare to the list, where am I? Now I've got a list of things I gotta fix, and take them one at a time and start fixing them. And then if you create processes, you've got to document them and start doing them consistently over some period of time. And then at some point you've decided, okay, I think I got it. I think I got them all done. So the next step is you would do a pre-assessment. This is not a requirement of CMMC, but it's strongly recommended that you kind of do a walkthrough. You get a third party probably to come in and go through the process and say, yep, I agree with you, you're all ready. You got all these things done. Then you schedule a certification. So you hire an organization to come out and do the audit according to the rules. They submit the paperwork to the CMMC accreditation body, and they will pass you and certify you, and you're certified. Then you have to get recertified every 3 years. Okay, so what that certification does is basically the good housekeeping seal of approval that tells the Department of Defense and other contractors, you've gone through the audit and you passed. So we're gonna consider you safe for 3 years until we come out and audit you again. So how long would it take an organization to get from where you are now to then? It's going to depend on how far behind are you, right? So, but I would guess it's a year, 2 years. I mean, unless you're 99% of the way there already, you're going to have some work to do. So the program, the CMMC program, will require that all organizations have that certification by the end of 2026. So you've got a 5-year window for this to happen. But it would not be unusual for an organization to need 2 or 3 years to get all the stuff in place in order to say, okay, now I'm ready.
Okay, so where can an organization get help preparing for certification?
So especially if you're a small company, maybe you've only got 50 or 70 employees, you might not even have a full-time IT department, you might just have a part-time or you outsource it or something. So it could be that you don't have a lot of resources to create these controls that are required in the program. So you might want to go out and find some help. There are organizations called RPOs, Registered Provider Organizations. So this is a company like Dopkins and Company that is registered with the Department of Defense, the CMMC accreditation body, to provide consulting, advice, remediation, help, to take an organization through the process. So if you're subject to level 3 and you get the list, there might actually be items on the list that you don't understand any of the words. So I don't even know if I'm doing this because I don't know what the words mean. So it's not unusual for you to need somebody to guide you through what do these cybersecurity requirements mean. So an RPO is a company that's in the business of providing cybersecurity consulting, etc., and is offering those services specifically to the Department of Defense supply chain. So an RPO has on its staff RPs, registered practitioners. So you and I, Pat, are both CMMC RPs. So that means we've been gone through the training to understand what is the CMMC process and how does this all work, so that we can provide that advice to a prospective organization looking for certification.
Okay, so when an organization thinks that they're prepared to be certified, where can they go or how do they find a certifier?
So there's a website that you can go to, CMMCAB.org. So that's the CMMC accreditation body.org. And on that website, there's a tab for Marketplace. So on that Marketplace, you can find organizations that are RPOs, individuals who are RPs, and organizations who are C3PAOs, which is Certified Third-Party Assessor Organization. So those are the auditors. And C3PAOs employ certified assessors. So those are the individuals who will come out and do that. So if you think you're ready, you've gone through your preparedness and you're satisfied that you're ready to hire an auditor, you can go on the CMMCAB.org website, find yourself a C3PAO and contact them and say, I want a CMMC certification audit. So you can find on the website, they're categorized by city, by state, all that sort of thing. So you might want to pick someone that's close by you because it's going to be less in travel expenses or whatever. But you have to pay the C3PAO for an audit engagement. So they'll give you a quote. You might contact 2 or 3 of them and get competing quotes, just like you would with buying anything else. Show me your references, whatever it happens to be, and you select the C3PAO and they'll conduct the audit. So they will come to your office. There will be an on-site visit, and they will review your documentation, your evidence, and satisfy themselves, as any auditor would in any kind of an audit, that you are performing these practices and that you have processes that are sound, robust, and mature. And they will then submit that paperwork. It gets processed and it goes to the accreditation body, and they will issue the actual certificate to the organization, which is good for 3 years.
Okay, so I think that's all we have for questions. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
So one other thing that's of note is that if you hired an organization, an RPO, to help you in the process of getting ready, even if that organization is a certified third-party assessor, they cannot assess you. But an auditor, to be independent, cannot audit his or her own work. So an organization that has helped you get ready can't certify you. So that organization might also be a C3PAO, but you couldn't use them to do that. So you'd have to get another one. So you're not required to use an RPO to prepare. You're not required to do a pre-assessment, although it's a really good idea. Those 2 things would be done by the RPO. And then the C3PAO would be who you'd talk to when you're ready to be certified at some future point.
Okay.
So I think that's answers all those questions. If there are any other questions that you might have regarding CMMC, please feel free to reach out to either Patrick or myself, and we'd be happy to discuss with you your specific circumstances for your organization, for your level, for your experience, for your the types of information, FCI or CUI, that you may have, all that kind of stuff that relates to you specifically. We'd be more than happy to have that conversation. So thanks very much for your time, Pat.
Yep, thank you, Bill. Thank you all for joining, and hope you learned something today about CMMC.